Hi, my name is Layton. I'm an intuitive and a mystic, and I'm also an anthroposophist. So today I wanted to talk about etherization of the blood, but specifically the way that it relates to neurobiological and neuroplastic changes. So that being said, I'm going to give a very brief overview of etherization of the blood. And I tried recording this already and I could not keep it brief. So I wrote something, and this time I'm going to read my brief overview so that I don't get into adding all of these different things. But if you are someone that's coming into this and does not already have an understanding of etherization of the blood that goes beyond my brief overview, then I do actually lecture on this for quite a bit of time in my current course, Overcoming the Lower Doppelganger, which I'm going to link below in the description box. And I just wanted to say about that I actually, if you are someone that is really interested in taking the course but can't afford it, and by can't afford it, I mean if you are struggling to have your basic needs met, struggling to pay rent, struggling to afford food, things like that, I do have a sponsorship program available. And due to limited slots, I have to be very selective and discerning with who I choose. So I'm also going to link that below. I have a form on my website that you can fill out that sends me an email. And essentially, it just asks you to tell me a little bit about your situation and why you feel drawn to take this course. And then I will go over that and pray about it. And yeah, to me, it's really important that this is accessible because honestly, the reason why I'm even charging for my course has nothing to do with the information. It has everything to do with the amount of writing and filming and the different things I had to pay for to put the course together and all of the coding I had to do. And I had to pay myself for my time because actually, and I don't know how many people know this, but I completely stopped taking sessions. I basically completely gave up my income for around 2 months, or not completely, but 90% of my income I gave up for around 2 months to make this course happen. So I do need to charge something for it. But at the same time, I also really want this to be accessible to people that are in need. And I know what it's like to not have a home. I know what it's like to not be able to afford food and have to worry about that stuff, but at the same time, really be in need of that kind of guidance. So it's important to me that that's accessible. But that being said, because I'm not going to go super in depth into this, I am going to link below Rudolf Steiner's lecture that is actually titled Etherization of the Blood. And because some people can kind of go into this and feel like his terminology might be a little bit intense, or maybe you need a better explanation with this, I am also going to link below Gigi Young's lecture on etherization of the blood because she is very thorough, very extensive, and it's free and really helpful. And if you are somehow finding me before you find her, please go check out her channel because she's beyond incredible. So that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and read my brief overview. Etherization is the introduction of higher forces into the human form through activation and awakening of the heart center, which then acts as a furnace that burns away trauma, pain, and lower desires, essentially recycling them into a higher spiritual matter that begins to build up this glorified ether body that later becomes our resurrection body or our rainbow body. This is possible because the blood enters into this newly awakened heart space where it begins to purify and alchemize according to its newly founded connection with Christ and higher forces. This blood, Christed and spiritualized, circulates through the body, cleansing and redeeming anything in its path. The cleansed blood then permeates the pineal gland, which activates the third eye, and we begin this symbiotic relationship with our higher self and higher forces. This relationship continues the process and allows us to receive certain qualities and impulses. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about something that I call reverse etherization. It's not really a technical term, but I feel like it's easy to understand, where in etherization, of course, we are through the activation of the heart center, and which I go deeply into the connection that has to the nervous system, and how activating the parasympathetic nervous system is really, really necessary for us to be able to ground and center in the heart. I have videos on this and blog posts on this. If you're interested, please go check that out, because if I covered everything I wanted to cover in this video, it would be 5 or 6 hours long. So I'm really trying to keep it kind of short, or at least keep the introduction short. But when we awaken the heart center, when we really activate that parasympathetic nervous system and begin to have the capacity to hold these higher forces, we really start to enter into this space where we are building this 24/7 communication with them, and where we are kind of offering up all of our pain, all of our trauma. And it's like I was saying, it goes through the heart, and the furnace of the heart that is now heated and activated by really the Holy Spirit, holy fire, the flames of Christ, if you want to think of it that way. It begins to, and when I say burns away, I don't mean that it gets rid of it. I don't mean that we're bypassing. I mean that it begins to purify and alchemize. Alchemize is a really good way to look at this, and really redeem everything that is not of Christ, everything that is solely a result of our pain and our trauma and these lower center desires. And then that now Christed substance moves and permeates throughout our entire body. Like I said, it activates the pineal gland, it activates the third eye, and we begin to kind of glorify our ether body and turn it into something that has the likeness and resemblance of Christ. It is becoming a Christed form. It is spiritualizing the entirety of our form. So when we are reverse etherizing, this is essentially when the heart is shut down, the heart is hardened. We aren't entering that space of loving kindness and graciousness and patience and holiness and all of those fruits of the Spirit that are really active in the heart, because we are too dropped down into the sympathetic nervous system, which Rudolf Steiner associates with the 8th sphere, which is the lower astral. And we get locked into that space where we do not know how to find our way out of our trauma. We don't know how to find our way out of our pain. And so what begins to happen is, because the heart is so hardened, it really starts to snuff out that Christed light within us. It starts to snuff out that connection, and to the point where it's kind of this very, very tiny flame. It can't really burn anything away. In fact, your entire system is working 24/7 just to keep that flame alive, just to make sure that flame doesn't snuff out. And so then our pain and our trauma just ends up circulating. And as it circulates, it ends up reverse etherizing. So we're etherizing away from Christ. We are devolving. We are decaying. We are becoming resonant with the 8th sphere, resonant with the lower astral. And it is really if etherization is the spiritualization of our form, then we could really look at reverse etherization as making the form so material. We are rejecting anything of God, and even if that's not our intention, when we're locked in that space of pain and trauma, we really become so distant from that. And that is possible to heal, and it is possible to recover from, because I have been there. And so I think that when you enter into this space and you have a genuinely pure heart and you begin to understand the important role that the physical body, the human form, plays into this, and you know how important it is to regulate the nervous system, to build capacity and resilience within the nervous system, because this is what connects us to the higher nervous system. And I believe it's in my video on 5G and protection from EMFs and whatnot, where I talk about the higher nervous system and the lower nervous system. But I'm pretty sure I have a few videos where I talk about that, so I'm not going to get too into it right now. And that is also something that I cover very, very deeply in my course. But essentially, the higher nervous system, this is our connection to Christ. It's our connection to higher forces. And so we really need to build capacity within the body to have relaxation and have peace and have holiness and have the fruits of the Spirit kind of be something that we are introducing into our form. Even if we're not feeling it, if we are setting an intention and trying to go into that space and trying to build these things up and consciously asking for help repeatedly, that is going to happen. So I also just want to make it clear and say that etherizing according to Christ is not something that is set aside for specific, advanced, special individuals. This pattern exists within every single human being. If you have a physical human form, if you have a soul and you have a spirit, then you can etherize your physical body according to Christ. And you can spiritualize your human form in that way. And at the same time, we all also, every single one of us has the capacity to decay and has the capacity to devolve. And understanding these occult sciences is so important, because this is how we know what's happening, exactly what's happening. This is how we know how to work with certain energies and work with our body. And it's really important. I would say that for me, having this information was so groundbreaking. It completely changed absolutely everything. So the reason why I want to talk about etherization from a neurobiological perspective and touch on neuroplasticity is because we can see actual, measurable biological changes from processes that are very spiritual. And I think there are a lot of people that see science as something that kind of negates spirituality, or spirituality as something that kind of negates science. And the way that I see it, as someone who is a massive science nerd, I, for fun, got an education in medical neuroscience because that was something I was interested in. And so this is something that I just think is so fascinating. And I don't think that there is enough teaching and enough information that is tying together these physical processes in the esoteric world. There is some really, really incredible work on occult anatomy and esoteric anatomy. And I really think that we could be adding so much more to it at this point, because a lot of this work is fairly old and we have learned so much more about the physical form since then. And I think that there are a lot of things that we need to touch on. And I think that for people that are really struggling to conceptualize things such as the spiritualized form, when we are able to point it to something that is very biological, when we are able to show that it's measurable within the human body, I think that will really cause people to wake up and begin to look at this in a different perspective and take it more seriously, because it is something that we can physically see. And when it comes to neuroplasticity, if you don't know what neuroplasticity is, it is essentially the brain's ability to form new neural connections. And these neural connections can help with things such as memory, so they can improve your memory. They can help with the integration of the personality. They can help with with breaking bad habits and building new positive habits. And actually, they can also, building these new neural connections can help with our physical health, and it can help reduce pain. This is something that they have studied quite extensively in pain management. So there's a lot that goes into this. And I'm not necessarily saying that neuroplasticity is what causes etherization, because, we have correlation and then we have causation. You can develop new neural pathways. You can, you can neurobiologically change your brain. In fact, when we look at kind of the technological movement, where we have these people that worship technology and they think technology is going to come in and save everything, they are looking at machines that can do all of this stuff and create these neural pathways for us and create these brain changes for us. And they're thinking that that is going to spiritualize the form. We even have machines that induce states of meditation, but that's just simply not how it works. And the way I see it is that it's actually the complete other way around, and that it is etherization that really causes and solidifies those changes, and that we are actually missing out on so much when we attempt to enter into a relationship with our neurobiology from a purely technological or purely medical standpoint. And I'm going to get more into that and why I believe that. So when I was researching this, and I just want to say, I do not know any other anthroposophist that has specifically covered this. So if you are an anthroposophist, or you are kind of in this circle and you know of anyone who is talking about etherization and neuroplasticity, please send them my way. I'm really interested in this subject, and I was kind of scouring everywhere trying to find someone else that was saying this. So I would really, really love if you do know of anyone, if you could point me in their direction, because I would really love to check out their work and see, what's going on there. Because like I said, I don't think there is enough information on this. But when I was researching this, I came across something really interesting, and that was the role of meditation in studies and trials where they are intentionally attempting to create a positive impact and create positive like neurobiological changes and rebuilding neural connections and whatnot. And something that Steiner actually says in the very beginning of his lecture, and that's titled Etherization of the Blood, is he talks about how our thoughts, they are actually beings, and they represent us being influenced by whatever beings we're kind of connected to in the moment. So if we are in the higher nervous system and we're connected to higher beings, of course we're going to have thoughts that are thoughts of morality, thoughts of love, thoughts of peace, thoughts of unity, and thoughts of forgiveness, things of that nature. However, when we are very dysregulated, when we're in the lower nervous system, we are far more likely to be experiencing thoughts that are completely intrusive. They're not from us at all. And they are literally from these lower astral beings that are just projecting and spewing all of this crap onto us 24/7. And so I started thinking about this, and I was thinking about it specifically in terms of neuroplastic changes. And I was thinking about how we literally have these higher beings or these lower beings that are causing neuroplastic changes. I mean, I personally feel like there is no way around that knowledge when you are spiritually aware and you really start to look at things that way. Because if that were not the case, then how come in all of these studies and all of these trials is meditation the number one thing that they introduce in order to create positive, long-lasting neuroplastic changes in adults? So when I was looking into what they do when they are aiming to create these neuroplastic changes, what kinds of meditations do they do, and how do they implement this? I came across something called compassion training, and I was like, wow, this completely lines up with everything that I was thinking. And one of the things that they do in compassion training is actually a meditation called loving kindness meditation, where essentially the goal is to meditate on your heart center, and specifically to meditate on loving and kind thoughts towards yourself, towards those around you, towards animals, towards life in general, and to continue focusing and really building that up within you. And I was thinking about that, and I'm thinking, you mean to tell me that we have the understanding that meditation, specifically meditation that is activating the heart center, and this is something that it's not like the heart is quite literally in an X-ray expanding and opening and they can see the higher forces coming in. That is not measurable. But what they can measure is they can measure its impact, the heart meditation's impact on the nervous system, its impact on the brain and on gray matter, its impact on on all of these different physiological processes. And they have to wonder where that comes from, right? They have to wonder why it is when we meditate in this way that we see these positive changes that we don't see with anything else. And this is why, without that element of meditation, without that element of specifically the meditations on compassion, meditations on loving kindness, they did not see the same results. The results were not as long lasting. I saw study after study after study that backed this up, and I was absolutely mind blown. And I was like, wow, this really just completely ties together and confirms what I was thinking. So to tie it all together and kind of really paint a picture for you, when we are etherizing, as I was saying in the beginning of this video, we begin to purify everything within the body. We begin to redeem everything within the body, and it really starts to spiritualize our human form. I have touched on in the past so many different biological processes and their connections to spirituality. So, for example, I've touched on the prefrontal cortex and the important role that it plays in the development of moral impulses. I have a whole blog post about that on my website, and that was something that was very fascinating to me because we really do need the body connection and we need the spirit connection, and they are not separate from one another. Etherization makes that knowledge plain as day. They are one and the same. When we are etherizing according to Christ, our heart, our physical heart, is changing. The blood in our body is becoming spiritualized. It is becoming etherized. And all of that spiritualized substance is going up into the ether body, the etheric body, where it is building up this new spiritualized, immortal form. It is building up this permanent temple for our soul to eventually completely reside in. And the reason why that is so important to understand is that, yes, we still have our physical form that we are very grounded into. And yes, the physical form exists as something where we can drop into the lower nervous system, and we can experience these lower desires, and we can kind of get locked in this place of pain and trauma. However, by simply doing things such as holding love and compassion in our hearts through etherization, what we are doing is we're entering into that relationship with higher forces. So higher forces and they're not looking at us saying, you need to etherize your form, you need to spiritualize your form, and you're on your own with that. They are actively working with us. And the fact that that is causing measurable changes in our physical body, I think is just absolutely phenomenal. And so what happens when we start creating these neuroplastic changes and they start changing the gray matter in our brain and improving the gray matter in our brain, which impacts our emotional regulation. It impacts our cognition. It impacts our morality. It impacts our circulation, ironically, but not coincidentally. It impacts our entire endocrine system. And so it really starts impacting everything. And I will say, I fully believe that it has a very strong impact on the pineal gland. And if you're looking at things from a strictly biological perspective, there is not a direct influence between the pineal gland and these neuroplastic changes. However, when the pineal gland is very active, it releases a lot of melatonin, and the melatonin can create positive neuroplastic changes. And so it does have an indirect interaction with it. But spiritually, I see it as having a much larger impact than what we even know about. But if we are spiritualizing the entire form, what it's doing essentially is creating balance within the entire body, within the entire system. And if we can measure that and see that through meditation, through compassion training, through holding loving kindness in the heart, we are bringing that balance and wholeness to the entire physical body and increasing gray matter, increasing positive neuroplastic changes, making it so that we now have moral impulses that we did not have before. Again, through meditation, because you can just do different exercises to create neuroplastic changes. And without that element of meditation, they did not see the same long-term effects. So it is because we're entering in that state of meditation, or they also study this with prayer and chanting and things of that nature. So we are clearly entering into this very high state, this state that is putting us in the correct position to spiritualize the form, because you can meditate, you can pray without necessarily spiritualizing the form if there's not the intention to connect with Christ. And if we instead have an intention to connect with something else, then we can etherize our form, but we're going to be etherizing it to something that has nothing to do with the actual spiritualization of the form, and is not going to aid in building up that resurrection body. And it's much like tuning into the wrong radio station or the wrong TV channel and kind of just completely missing the program. So this is just something that was beyond fascinating to me. And there's I also, because I thought I covered everything, but there's one more thing that I wanted to say, and that is that the neuroplastic changes, as I was mentioning before, they really aid in creating our personality and developing our individuality. And etherization does the exact same thing. When we're etherizing the human form, we are kind of taking all of these lost fragments, pieces of ourselves that have been lost to trauma and pain and all of these things, and we're pulling them together, because all of that pain and trauma has now been purified, it's now been redeemed, and everything is unifying, it's coming together, it's reintegrating, and then it's processing itself through our entire form. So we are bringing a state of balance and wholeness to our form that we just would not have experienced without this process. But that being said, we can also severely fragment in our identity and completely split off if we are in a state of reverse etherization. And when we look at neuroplastic changes, trauma does this exact same thing to us, where when we are in such a traumatized state, or where our nervous system is in a very dysregulated state, we can start creating these new pathways that basically keep us in these negative thought loops where we are very catastrophic. We're in black and white thinking. I mean, this is what happens when the prefrontal cortex shuts down, is we become overwhelmed with cognitive distortions, which I would relate directly back to what Steiner says about thoughts being beings. And this is very on par with the idea of thought forms and egregores. I mean, I fully endorse and agree with Steiner's interpretation of that. That's how I see it too. And I really do think that our thoughts, they are great indicators of what we're tapping into and tuning into. But it's also really important to not judge ourselves if we begin to have intrusive thoughts, and not judge ourselves when we drop into the lower centers, because more often than not, it's really because we're experiencing some sort of dysregulation or neurogenic inflammation or something that is creating a disturbance in the nervous system and really dropping us down into that lower nervous system. And I hope all of these terms I'm putting out there aren't too confusing. I'm really doing my best to bring this together and make it something that is easy to understand and easy to grasp, because it is such a massive topic that I'm trying to shrink down into about 30 minutes or so. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this, and I plan to continue to go a lot deeper into stuff like this in the future, because I love making those connections between the physical human form and occult science. I just think that it is all interconnected. I see it all as the exact same entity manifesting itself in a different way. On one hand, we have this very material manifestation because we are currently, although we're also spiritual beings, we are also material beings. And there's very much that balance. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say about that. And if you enjoyed this video, that means the absolute world to me because I feel like a massive nerd when I start talking about this stuff. And I love having someone to talk to about it. I just think it is so fascinating, truly. And that being said, if you enjoyed this video, please like it and consider commenting. It would really help my channel. And that's something that I don't think I've ever even said in a video before, honestly, because I'm always so into all of this stuff that it doesn't even cross my mind. But before this, I was like, I really need to start saying that. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. It really, really means the world to me. There's quite honestly nothing I would rather be doing than this.